Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a look at the stack of sources you sent over, specifically some really powerful excerpts from Chris R. Villasis's work, The Missions Quotient.
Yeah, and this deep dive is so important because we're moving past the glossy startup phase of an initiative.
The honeymoon period.
Exactly. The author gives us this really rigorous diagnostic tool. It's for anyone, really, in any sphere who's trying to get from just short-term activity to enduring impact.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to figure out what happens after the big launch. We're trying to find a shortcut to understanding those invisible foundations.
Right.
The things that really determine if a mission or a project or even just a personal calling is going to flourish or just collapse under its own weight. We're getting into the hidden dimensions.
And that gets right to the core problem the author identifies. It's the thing that sets the whole book in motion, really.
Which is?
Why does incredible passion, that fiery, unshakable zeal, so often lead to a total collapse?
It feels so counterintuitive.
It does. But the data suggests that real or high initial passion can actually predict a rapid burnout.
Okay, let's unpack that, because that is a painful reality that I think a lot of us have seen or even experienced. The author calls it the Zeal Gap. You've got a leader, they're driven by this deep calling, they're ready to change the world, just fueled by pure enthusiasm, and then bam, they hit a wall.
They do. And we always blame external things, not enough funding, opposition, just difficult circumstances. But what the sources are saying is that the wall is often structural.
So internal.
It's rooted in internal fragmentation. Passion is an amazing fuel source to start a journey, but it's just too volatile to sustain the whole trip.
That distinction, passion as a fleeting spark that can start a fire but can't sustain a hearth, that's a really powerful image.
It is.
So what happens when that spark runs out? What does that internal fragmentation actually look like?
It looks like an identity crisis. When passion is your main engine, the mission becomes all about the activity itself.
The busyness?
The busyness.
Yeah.
So as soon as the results stall or that emotional high just fades, and it always does, the leader feels this immediate despair. Why? Because their identity was tied to the feeling of being useful, not the actual durable framework of the mission. They just weren't ready for the long, hard, unglamorous middle part.
So if passion is a bad long-term strategy, what's supposed to take its place?
And that brings us right to the core thesis of the whole MQ framework. Faithful, effective mission isn't sustained by passion or even just strategy alone.
Right.
It's the intentional result of integrated capacities. And these are capacities you have to cultivate, covering both your inner character and your outer competence. Effectiveness is a formed capacity under grace. It's something you build deliberately, like a skill.
I really appreciate that framing. It challenges a huge paradigm in leadership, especially in those fast-moving sectors where activity is so often mistaken for faithfulness.
Yes.
The book is really demanding that we distinguish between activity and alignment.
That's the fragmentation problem in a nutshell. We see busyness as a virtue. The Missions Quotient, the MQ, is designed specifically to measure the coherence between three things.
What are they?
Your identity, who you are, your assignment, what you're meant to do, and your action, how you actually live it out day to day. If those three aren't in sync, you get high motion, low obedience, and eventually definite burnout.
And that reliance on just one single strength is a trap, isn't it? I've seen leaders who are brilliant communicators or they're strategic geniuses, but the sources warn that leaning on just one dominant strength isn't enough.
It's not. That one strength becomes a way to compensate, to mask profound weaknesses somewhere else. You might be a strategic genius, but if you don't have relational depth or spiritual grounding, that one strength can't carry the whole weight. The MQ insists on systems-level alignment.
The whole system has to be healthy.
You need wholeness, because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and often that weak link is hiding in plain sight.
That's the perfect transition to the framework itself. So the MQ is this holistic diagnostic lens. It's not just a dry metric, it's a path to development.
Right, and the goal is robust sustainability. It's to make sure that your innovation, your wisdom, your character, and your conviction all mature together.
So they grow in step with each other.
They have to. They create a sustainable whole person and a whole system. If you only grow one, say, innovation without growing wisdom alongside it, you've built something that just cannot last.
Okay, so let's get into the framework. The Missions Quotient has 8 critical dimensions. The author calls them the root system of a great tree. You suggested we group these thematically, starting with the deep internal roots.
Exactly. Let's start where the deep work happens with the character foundations first. Because remember, what's unseen will eventually always determine what is seen.
Let's start at the very core then, with spiritual depth. Soup's Q. What is that, and what does it actually protect a leader from?
So SQ is your theological and devotional root system. The author calls it the architecture of longevity. Practically, this means a rigorous discipline, like, say, protecting an hour of silence or focused prayer every single day.
Even when your to-do list is screaming at you.
Especially then. That discipline ensures that a leader's doing all that visible activity never outpaces their being, their inner formation. If you're constantly pouring out without that deep, intentional renewal, the system is just designed for collapse.
That's a powerful internal guardrail. Okay, moving outward a bit, we have resilience and perseverance, RQ. How is this different from just being tough?
Well, toughness often relies on willpower, or external motivation. RQ is anchored in something different. Faithfulness here is redefined not as grit, but as long obedience in the same direction.
Long obedience. I like that.
It's the capacity to maintain that commitment year after year,
Yeah.
even when the work is tedious or the results are just minimal. Perseverance in this framework is often boring, not heroic, but it's absolutely essential for endurance.
And then for this internal group, we have sacrificial commitment, SEQ. The author calls it the costly grace of mission, but I see a huge warning label attached to this idea of sacrifice.
Here's one.
As leaders, we're taught sacrifice is good. So what's the line between healthy SEQ and just destructive martyrdom?
That is the most critical distinction here. SCQ has to be disciplined and theologically informed. The warning is stark. Sacrifice without wisdom leads to burnout, not blessing.
So what does wise sacrifice look like?
Healthy sacrifice is scheduled, it's measured, it's sustainable. It allows you to give your best over decades. Unwise sacrifice is impulsive, reactive, and ultimately self-destructive.
Yeah.
It often leads to resentment. If your sacrifice is destroying your health or your key relationships, it is a negative MQ indicator, period.
That is a huge reality check. Okay, so that's the internal character piece, the things that secure the leader. But a mission doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all.
So we need to talk about the external currency, which brings us to relational depth, RD.
What's fascinating here is the core insight that trust is identified as the true currency of kingdom advancement. The sources explicitly state that relational trust is just exponentially more valuable than any strategic budget, any program, or even your own brilliance.
Intellectually, I get that. But so many leaders feel pressure to prioritize budgets and, tangible results over the slow, inefficient work of building trust. How does the book suggest managing that conflict?
By understanding the long-term cost. If you bypass building RDQ, any program you implement will eventually fail because it doesn't have that foundation of communal buy-in. Trust is the lubricant that lets systems adapt and survive a crisis. So you manage the conflict by prioritizing the one-on-one time, the listening session.
Like before the big planning retreat.
Exactly. You build trust before you implement the program.
Okay, moving from trust to engagement, we have cultural intelligence, CQ. This feels incredibly relevant right now.
It's framed so beautifully as incarnational engagement. It's the humble, difficult art of genuinely loving people we don't yet fully understand.
And that requires a massive shift in how we do things.
Profound shift. It means prioritizing relationships over programs. It means engaging in curious learning before you even try to teach or influence. CQ demands the humility to actually enter a culture and see the world through their eyes, not just yours.
All right, so that covers the internal character roots and the external relational roots. Now let's shift to the system and strategy needed for multiplication and endurance, starting with missional mindset, MMQ.
MMQ is all about identity, but at a system level. It means shaping your organization's identity and your own around sentness, around being a sent one, rather than just your job description.
What's the practical difference, though? I mean, if I'm teaching Sunday school, isn't that my mission?
It's a task within your mission, but your identity is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
If that Sunday school task goes away, your identity doesn't collapse because your MMQ is rooted in being a sent person, no matter the activity. It gives you resilience when programs fail or mandates change.
Right. And following that mindset is adaptive strategy, AQ. The book uses this great phrase, faithful flexibility. How do you stay faithful to the core mission while also being so flexible?
That's the tension of AQ, isn't it? In complex, chaotic context, which is most of them, rigid 5-year plans just fail, and they fail fast. AQ means you learn to hold your plans loosely. You respond to cues through prayerful discernment. You have a strategy, but you're open to being redirected.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you plan to launch a specific program in a neighborhood, but you realize the community's most immediate need is something totally different, like clean water. AQ says you shift resources immediately, even if it messes up your original timeline.
Got it. And that brings us to the last one, the ultimate measure of the whole framework, reproducibility, DQM. My question here is, doesn't an intense focus on multiplication take away from the quality of the immediate impact?
That's a natural tension. But DQM insists that true quality is measured by what outlives the messenger. The mission has to be designed to multiply and outlive the leader. Otherwise, it's just a dependency model, not a sustainable mission.
So it's about indigenous ownership.
Exactly. DQM is intensely focused on leadership, multiplication, and indigenous ownership. If the local community can't sustain and lead the mission without you, then the output, no matter how impressive it looks right now, is ultimately temporary.
So we have the 8 capacities: spiritual depth, resilience, sacrificial commitment, relational depth, cultural intelligence, missional mindset, adaptive strategy, and reproducibility. That is a comprehensive framework. How does a leader even begin to apply this? What are the practical mindset shifts?
The book really highlights 2 major shifts. First is the stewardship of your calling. We're often told to just obey our passion, right?
Okay.
But the sources argue your calling must be stewarded. It means you have to discipline your passion with wisdom, with accountability, with ethical long-term thinking. You move past that fleeting spark of zeal to the measured, sustainable effort of a professional.
Okay, and the second shift is about evaluation. Most of us see assessment as this, tedious managerial chore.
A necessary evil. But the book reframes it completely. It becomes a spiritual discipline.
I hope so.
Evaluation becomes an active spiritual practice. Leaders need to regularly audit their MQ every 6 to 12 months is what's recommended. Not to check boxes, but to find those hidden formation gaps before they become full-blown crises. It's preventative maintenance for your soul and for the whole system.
So let's give the listeners some really actionable takeaways. What are some specific practices that MQ encourages to, get past inertia and protect the mission's focus?
Okay, to overcome inertia, they need to translate broad visions into what the author calls next physical actions, or NPAs.
We're all guilty of having vague goals.
All of us. So instead of writing, develop leaders this quarter, you have to write, schedule a 1-hour mentoring session with Sarah and John for Tuesday at 9 a.m. to cover adaptive strategy. That specificity breaks the paralysis. It demands a clear physical step.
That level of detail is a game changer for avoiding procrastination. And what about protecting mental bandwidth? There's the MQ priority filter.
This is all about intentional refusal, which is surprisingly hard for zealous leaders. Before you commit to any new task, you run it through the MQ filter. Does this align perfectly with our core mission? Can it be radically simplified? Can it be delegated? Can it just be deferred for 3 months?
So the first step isn't figuring out how to do more.
No, it's figuring out what to say no to. That protects the system from mission creep.
And finally, we have to talk about metrics. We're often slaves to the numbers, attendees, budget size, but the MQ framework says focusing only on performance metrics can actually be destructive long-term.
It demands a qualitative shift. Instead of focusing only on performance metrics, how fast leaders must focus on relational metrics.
And those are things like what?
Measuring the quality of unsolicited feedback you get, the depth of character growth you actually see in the people you're mentoring, the true level of indigenous ownership and leadership capacity that's being developed. Those relational metrics are the real indicators of enduring fruit because they measure formation, not just output.
If we were to synthesize the core highlight of this entire deep dive, it feels like it's this. The ultimate measure of a mission isn't how brightly it burns at the start, but how long and how far it illuminates the world. And critically, whether it can keep illuminating after you're gone.
That's the summation right there. The MQ is all about moving from short-term visibility, those quick performance-driven wins, to enduring impact, which is reproducible and sustainable because it's rooted in character.
The transformation the author is calling for is so powerful, moving from performance to formation. The goal is becoming the kind of person who is an integrated sent one, someone whose inner character and outer competence are in such harmony that their life itself becomes a kind of reproducible map for others.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought, which really builds on the whole philosophy of this material. The book powerfully highlights that what is unseen, your character, your motives, your emotional health, It eventually and always determines what is seen, your social impact, your final outputs.
So we challenge you, the learner, if you were to conduct an MQ audit on your work or your calling right now today, what unseen dimensions, spiritual depth, relational depth, maybe adaptive strategy, is currently determining, for better or for worse, your most visible output? Where is that gap hiding?